A tall, thin black kid in a soaked hoodie walked into the most expensive restaurant in Boston on a Tuesday night and asked the hostess if he could wash dishes in exchange for a plate of food. She laughed. The bartender laughed. A woman in a red dress at the bar turned on her stool and laughed without even knowing what she was laughing at. But an hour later, nobody in that kitchen was laughing because the kid who had come in begging for scraps had just saved a $4,000 tasting menu from collapse, and he had done it with a cast-iron skillet he carried in his backpack. The rain had been falling on Commonwealth Avenue for 3 hours straight. Micah Lennox had been walking through it for 2 of them. His sneakers had soaked through somewhere around Kenmore Square. His hoodie, gray, 2 sizes too big, bought for $1 at a Goodwill in Roxbury the previous spring, had stopped being a hoodie somewhere around the public garden and had become a cold, wet second skin that smelled like bus exhaust and wet wool. He was 19 years old. He had been sleeping under the overpass behind South Station for 6 weeks. Before that, a shelter on Harrison Avenue, until he had been asked to leave for a reason he still did not fully understand. Before that, his grandmother's apartment on Blue Hill Avenue, until the apartment was no longer his grandmother's, until it was no longer anyone's, until the building itself was sold to a developer, who turned it into something with a rooftop deck and a waiting list. His grandmother had been dead for 7 months. What he carried in the backpack was not much: a change of socks, a toothbrush in a Ziploc bag, a composition notebook, its pages swollen with water damage held shut by a rubber band, and at the bottom, wrapped in a dish towel that had once been white, a 10-inch cast-iron skillet that weighed more than everything else in the bag combined. The skillet had been his grandmother's. Her name was Etta Lennox, and she had cooked with that skillet every single day of Micah's life until the day she could not stand up from her chair anymore. She had seasoned it with decades of bacon grease and patience, and it was the blackest, smoothest, most cared-for piece of iron Micah had ever touched. He had carried it through every shelter, every park bench, every underpass. It was the last thing he had of hers, and he was not letting it go. The restaurant was called Harlan's. It sat on the corner of Commonwealth and Dartmouth, the kind of place with no sign on the door, just a brass number and a doorman who decided whether you were the kind of person who belonged inside. The windows glowed the color of warm butter. Through the glass, Micah could see white tablecloths, candles, waiters in black, the slow choreography of a dining room that cost $300 a head before wine. He should have kept walking. He should have gone to the shelter intake on Albany Street, stood in the line, waited for a cot. He knew the routine. He had done it before, but the smell coming from the kitchen vent above the side door stopped him the way a hand on the chest stops a man mid-step. Butter browning in a pan, shallots sweating, the sharp, bright edge of white wine hitting a hot skillet, and beneath all of it, something deeper, something roasted and dark and built from bones. His grandmother's kitchen came back to him so hard he had to put a hand on the wall. He stood there for 5 minutes. Then he went around to the front door and opened it. The hostess was a young woman with red lipstick and a clipboard and the particular kind of patience that expensive restaurants train into their staff. She looked at him. She looked at the puddle forming beneath his sneakers. She looked at the backpack. "Can I help you?" "I can wash dishes," Micah said. His voice was steady. He had practiced making it steady. "I'll wash dishes for 2 hours. All I need is 1 plate of whatever's left." She did not laugh out loud. She was too professional for that. But her mouth did something, a small tightening at the corners, that accomplished the same thing. "We don't really do that here. I'm clean. I work hard. I won't bother anyone." A man at the end of the bar, broad-shouldered, silver watch, the kind of jawline that comes with money and good dentists, turned around. "Son, this isn't a soup kitchen." Someone near the window chuckled. The woman in the red dress covered her mouth with the back of her hand. The man behind the bar, a black man in his 50s with a shaved head and forearms built from years of lifting stock pots, set down the glass he was polishing and looked at Micah without expression. "Let the kid wash dishes, Nina." The hostess looked at him. "Roscoe, I can't just tell Kemp I said it's fine." The prep dishwasher called out anyway. "Kid fills the gap. Kid eats. Everybody wins." Nina looked at Micah again. She looked at Roscoe. She picked up the phone behind the podium and dialed the kitchen. 5 minutes later, Micah Lennox was standing in the dish pit of one of the best restaurants in Boston. His hoodie hung on a hook, a clean apron tied around his waist. His hands in water hot enough to make his knuckles ache. The kitchen at Harlan's was a machine. 8 cooks on the line, every one of them moving at a speed that looked reckless until you realized it was perfectly controlled. At the pass, calling out tickets in a low-clipped voice, stood Douglas Kemp, chef owner, 53 years old, 2 Michelin stars, a reputation in the food world that was built on equal parts brilliance and cruelty. Kemp had not looked at Micah when he came in. He had not acknowledged the arrangement. He had simply glanced at the dish pit, seen a body in an apron, and gone back to plating a lamb dish with the focus of a surgeon. Micah washed. He washed fast and clean and without stopping, the way his grandmother had taught him to clean her kitchen on Blue Hill Avenue. He stacked plates by size. He sorted silverware. He wiped down the edges of the dish pit with a towel he wrung out every 10 minutes. Nobody told him to do any of this. He did it because Etta Lennox had spent 14 years teaching him that a clean kitchen was the first and last sign of a person who took foods seriously. He was invisible in the dish pit, and he was fine with that. He did not need to be seen. He needed to eat. But he could see the line from where he stood. He could see the sauté station, the grill, the pass. He could hear the tickets being called. He could smell every dish that left the kitchen, and his hands in the hot water moved in time with the rhythm of the line because some part of him, the part his grandmother had built, could not help it. At 20 minutes to 9, something went wrong. A cook at the sauté station, a young guy with a red face and panicked eyes, pulled a pan off the burner and stared at it. The sauce inside had broken. It had separated into a greasy, curdled mess that looked nothing like what it was supposed to look like. The cook said a word under his breath. Then he said it louder. Then he said it loud enough for the whole line to hear. Kemp came down the line like a storm. He looked at the pan. He looked at the cook. That's the beurre blanc for table 12. They ordered the halibut 14 minutes ago. There are 6 courses on that ticket, and this is course 3. Chef, I can refire. You don't have time to refire. I need that sauce in 90 seconds or the entire ticket backs up and I have to refire the fish, and the halibut will be overcooked by the time you catch up. Do you understand what you've done? The cook's face went from red to white. Chef, Get off my line. The cook untied his apron. He walked to the back of the kitchen. He did not come back. Kemp stared at the empty station. The ticket printer was still going. The dining room was full. He had 7 courses to get out in the next 40 minutes, and he was down a sauté cook. Micah was still in the dish pit. His hands were still in the water. But he was looking at the empty station, and something in his chest had gone tight and hot in a way he recognized. He knew that sauce. He knew it the way he knew the bones of his own hands. His grandmother had taught him beurre blanc on a Wednesday evening in her kitchen when he was 12 years old. She had stood behind him with her hands over his and showed him how to swirl the butter in, piece by piece off the heat, so the emulsion held. She had made him do it 9 times until his wrist knew the motion without his brain. Don't think about it, she had said. Your hand knows. Let your hand know. He pulled his arms out of the water. He dried them on the towel. He walked to the sauté station. Kemp turned and looked at him for the first time. What are you doing? I can make the sauce, chef. The kitchen went quiet. Not all at once. In sections, the way a room goes quiet when something is happening that everyone can feel but nobody can name. Kemp's face did not change. You're the dishwasher. I can make the sauce. Kid, go back to the pit. Shallot white wine, heavy cream, reduce by half, pull off heat, cold butter in pieces, swirl don't whisk, finish with lemon and white pepper, 90 seconds. Kemp stared at him. The kitchen stared at him. The ticket printer kept printing. You have 60. Micah reached for a clean saucepan. His hands were not shaking. They had been shaking in the dish pit. They had been shaking when he walked through the door. They were not shaking now. He diced the shallot in 4 cuts. He had the wine in the pan before the shallot was translucent, which was wrong by classical standards, but right by his grandmother's, because Etta Lennox believed you built the flavor while the shallot was still fighting the heat. Not after it had given up. The wine hit the pan and the kitchen filled with a sound like a sharp breath. He let it reduce. He added the cream. He watched the surface. At the pass, Kemp had not moved. Micah pulled the pan off the heat. He reached into his backpack on the floor beside the dish pit and took out a cold stick of butter he had taken from the walk-in cooler 20 minutes earlier, because he had seen the sauté cook sweating and had known, in the quiet, automatic way his grandmother had trained into him, that something was going to go wrong at that station before the night was over. He dropped the first piece of butter into the pan and swirled. Not whisked. Swirled. The motion came from his wrist, not his arm, and it was the exact motion Micah Lennox had pressed into his muscle memory 7 years ago on a Wednesday night in a kitchen that no longer existed. The sauce came together. It was pale gold and glossy and moved like silk when he tilted the pan. He brought it to the pass. He set it down in front of Kemp. Kemp looked at the sauce. He picked up a clean spoon. He tasted it. He did not speak for what felt like a very long time, but was probably 4 seconds. "Who taught you that?" "My grandmother." Kemp looked at him. He looked at the sauce. He looked at the empty sauté station. The ticket printer was still going. "Get on this, don't talk. Don't slow down. If you burn anything, you're out." Micah stepped onto the line. He cooked the remaining 5 tickets for table 12 without a single misfire. He cooked the next 8 tickets after that. He cooked with a speed and a stillness that made the other cooks glance at each other across the line, the way musicians glance at each other when someone sits in with the band and turns out to be better than anyone expected. At 11 o'clock, the last ticket went out. The kitchen began to break down. Cooks wiped their stations, wrapped their mise en place, scraped down the flat top. Micah stood at the sauté station with his hands flat on the stainless steel and breathed. Roscoe appeared beside him. He set down a plate. Halibut with beurre blanc, roasted root vegetables, a small salad, a piece of bread. "Sit down and eat that before you fall over." Micah sat on an overturned milk crate by the back door and ate. He ate slowly because his stomach had been empty for a day and a half, and he knew what happened when you ate too fast on an empty stomach. His grandmother had taught him that too, not from a textbook, from experience. Kemp came out of his office 20 minutes later. He stood in the doorway and watched Micah eat the way a man watches something he is trying to decide about. "What's your name?" "Micah Lennox. Where did you train?" "I didn't train anywhere." "You didn't go to culinary school?" "No." "You didn't stage anywhere?" "No, chef." "Your grandmother?" "Yes, chef." Kemp folded his arms. "Come back tomorrow. Same time. I'll put you on prep to start. If you can do what you did tonight for a week, I'll move you to the line." Micah looked at the plate in his hands. He looked at the last piece of bread. He looked at Kemp. "Thank you, chef." He came back. He came back every fight in 9 days. He prepped on the first 2, broke down whole fish, blanched vegetables, portioned proteins with a speed and precision that made the sous chef, a woman named Talia Reeves, with sharp eyes and no patience for anyone, stop what she was doing and watch. By day 3, he was on the line. By day 5, he was running the sauté station alone. By day 7, Kemp had stopped checking his plates before they went to the pass. On the 8th day, Talia pulled him aside after service. "You know what's happening Friday." "No." "Food writer." "The Globe." "She's doing a follow-up piece on Kemp." "The reservation's been on the books for 2 months." "Okay." Talia looked at him. "Kemp wants you on sauté for her table." "Only her table." "He's designing a special tasting menu and he wants your beurre blanc on the fish course." Micah nodded. "Micah." Her voice dropped. "He's also planning to bring you out to the dining room after the meal. Introduce you to the writer. The angle is..." She paused. She seemed to be choosing her words. "The angle is you." The story. Homeless kid walks in off the street, turns out to be a natural. Kemp discovers him. Kemp gives him a chance. Micah's hands went still at his sides. "He's already talked to his publicist. There's going to be a photographer." Micah did not speak. "I'm telling you because I think you should know before Friday, not during." "Thank you, Talia." She left. Micah stood in the hallway behind the kitchen for a long time. The notebook in his backpack, the composition book with the swollen pages held shut by the rubber band, was 3 feet from his hand. Inside it, in his grandmother's handwriting, were 47 recipes. jambalaya, smothered pork chops, peach cobbler with a buttermilk crust, red beans and rice the way her mother had made them in New Orleans before the family moved north, beurre blanc, written in Etta's careful cursive on page 31, because she had learned it from a French chef she worked under as a line cook in 1986, the only black woman in that kitchen, and she had written it down that night in her apartment so she would never need to ask him again. He opened the notebook. The pages crinkled. He turned to a page near the back where his grandmother had written something that was not a recipe. It was dated March 2019. Micah would have been 14. Baby, when somebody puts you on a plate and serves you up to make themselves look good, that ain't cooking. That's decoration. You are not a garnish. You are the meal. Don't let nobody plate you. He closed the notebook. He put the rubber band back. He zipped the backpack. On the 9th day, Micah came in early. The kitchen was empty. The prep cooks would not arrive for another 2 hours. He went to the walk-in and checked the fish for Friday's menu. He checked the butter. He checked the shallots. Then he heard voices from the office above the kitchen, the one with the glass window that looked down over the line. Kemp's office. The door was open. The voices carried down the stairwell the way voices carry in empty kitchens, off tile and steel, amplified by silence. The headline writes itself, Doug. A voice Micah did not recognize. Male, smooth, the cadence of someone who sold things for a living. Homeless kid walks in from the rain. You could have turned him away. You didn't. You saw something. That's the story. That is the story. Kemp's voice. Calm, certain. The Globe piece runs. We push it to the food blogs. The food blogs push it to social media, and by Monday morning, every outlet in the city is calling. We can time it with the James Beard semifinalist announcement. When is that? 3 weeks. If we get the Globe piece out this Friday, it's top of mind when the committee meets. And the kid? The kid gets a job. The kid gets a story. The kid gets out of whatever shelter he's been sleeping in. Where's the downside? A pause. Then a third voice. Lower. Careful. The downside is if the kid finds out using him as a press strategy before we've told him he's part of a press strategy. Micah recognized this voice. Talia. Talia? I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying tell him. He'll choose yes. Of course he'll choose yes. He's sleeping under a bridge. That's exactly why you need to tell him, Doug. Because he'll say yes whether he wants to or not. And you know the difference. Silence. A long one. The photographers confirmed for Friday. The publicist's voice again. I'll send over the shot list. We'll want him in the kitchen, apron on, plating. Maybe one with you and him together at the pass. The contrast is. I understand the contrast. Kemp's voice. Flat now. Micah went down the stairs. He went through the kitchen. He went out the back door into the alley. The October air hit his face, and he stood there breathing, hands on his knees, the backpack hanging off one shoulder. The cast-iron skillet inside it pressed against his spine. His grandmother's kitchen came back one more time. Not the kitchen on Blue Hill Avenue. The hospital. The room at Boston Medical where Micah Lennox had spent her last 3 days. The chess set was not there. There was no chess set in this memory. There was a cast-iron skillet on the rolling table beside the bed, because Micah had brought it, because she had asked him to bring it, because she had said she could not sleep without knowing where it was. Her hand on the skillet, thin. The veins raised. Micah. Yes, ma'am. Come here. He sat on the edge of the bed. You listen to me now. I'm listening. Don't you ever cook for somebody's pity. Her voice was a whisper, but it had iron in it, the same iron as the skillet under her hand. You hear me? Pity is not the same as respect. Pity will dress itself up like opportunity. It will open a door and stand there smiling, and the door won't be open for you. It'll be open for what you make them look like, Granny. You cook because you earned the right to be in that kitchen, not because somebody felt sorry and handed you an apron. Promise me. I promise. Her hand moved from the skillet to the side of his face. It was very light. It was the last time she touched him. You keep that pan seasoned, baby. You hear me? Don't let it dry out. Don't let nobody use it but you. He kept standing in the alley behind Harlan's for a long time. Then he went. Back inside, he did not go to the kitchen. He went to the small room behind the walk-in, where the staff kept their coats and bags. He put on his hoodie. He zipped his backpack with the skillet inside it. He took the composition notebook out, looked at it, and put it back. He walked out through the kitchen. Roscoe was at the bar, setting up for the evening. Roscoe saw the backpack. Roscoe saw the hoodie. Roscoe set down the bottle he was holding. "Micah! Yeah! You heard something!" "Yeah!" Roscoe looked at him the way he had looked at him on the first night level and without expression, except now there was something behind the expression that had not been there before. "I hear things in this place every week that I'm not supposed to hear. There's no good answer to it. You just have to decide what you're willing to carry." Micah looked at him. "Thank you for the first night. For all of it." "You don't owe me thanks. You earned your plate." Micah nodded. He went out the front door. He did not use the back. Nina, the hostess, was at the podium. She looked up as he passed. She did not laugh this time. She watched him go with a face that was trying to figure out what it was watching. He walked out into the October night and he kept walking. Friday morning. The kitchen at Harlan's opened at 6 for prep. Kemp arrived at 7. Talia arrived at 7:30. The fish was in the walk-in. The butter was portioned. The shallots were diced and stored in a deli container with a label in Micah's handwriting. Micah was not there. Talia found the apron folded on the station. She found the deli container. She found on the stainless steel shelf above the sauté station a single piece of paper torn from a composition notebook. It had a recipe written on it in an older woman's handwriting, beurre blanc. At the bottom, in a younger hand, in pencil, "This belongs to my grandmother. I'm leaving it so you know the sauce was hers, not his." Talia read it twice. She put it in her pocket. She went upstairs to Kemp's office and closed the door behind her. "He's gone." Kemp looked up. "He left the recipe. He left the prep work. He's gone." Kemp stared at her. Then he sat down slowly in his chair and looked at the glass window that overlooked the kitchen where 9 days ago a kid in a wet hoodie had made a sauce that stopped him mid-sentence. "He'll come back." "He won't. Call him. He doesn't have a phone, Doug." The silence in the office lasted a long time. Through the glass, the kitchen was beginning to fill with cooks arriving for the day, tying aprons, checking stations. The empty sauté station sat in the middle of the line like a missing tooth. "The Globe writer is coming at 8 tonight. I know. I need a sauté cook. I know that too. Can you?" "I can cover the station. I can't make his sauce. Nobody in this kitchen can make his sauce." Kemp put his hands flat on the desk. He looked at them for a long time. It was Roscoe who found him. Not because anyone asked Roscoe to look, but because Roscoe had been paying attention in the way that certain men in certain buildings pay attention. The kind of attention that comes from being the person in the room who never gets asked what he sees but who sees everything. Micah was at the public library on Boylston Street, 3rd floor, reference section, the table by the window that looks out over Copley Square. He had the composition notebook open in front of him. He was reading his grandmother's recipes the way some people read scripture, slowly, 1 page at a time, his lips moving faintly over the measurements and instructions. Roscoe sat down across from him. He did not speak for a while. He had brought 2 coffees from the cafe downstairs. He pushed one across the table. "I'm not here from Kemp." Micah looked up. "I'm not here from the restaurant. I'm not here with an offer. I'm here because I wanted to tell you something about your grandmother, and I should have told you the first night you walked in." Micah's hands went still on the notebook. Etta Lennox worked at Harlan's in 1986. She was a line cook. She was the only black woman in that kitchen. She was the best cook on that line by the 3rd week, and everyone in that kitchen knew it, and nobody said it out loud. Micah did not breathe. "I know this because I was a busboy there that year. I was 22. She was 38. She taught me how to hold a knife properly. She taught me how to taste before I seasoned. She called me baby, even though I was grown because they called everyone baby, and nobody ever asked her to stop. She left after 4 months. The chef at the time, man named Gerard, put her dish on the menu, her smothered pork chops. He put them on the menu under his own name and called it braised heritage pork Southern style. She asked for credit. He said line cooks don't get credit. She walked out that night. She didn't go back. Roscoe sipped his coffee. That kitchen changed its name twice since then. Gerard left. New owners came. Douglas Kemp bought the space 12 years ago. The menu is different, the decor is different, but the building is the same building, and some things about buildings do not change as easily as the menus do. Micah looked down at the notebook. His grandmother's handwriting swam in front of him. He blinked and it steadied. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you walked into your grandmother's kitchen without knowing it. And because you walked out of it for the same reason she did. And because I think you have the right to know that the ground you were standing on had her footprints in it before yours." They sat there for a long time. The library was quiet around them. A man at the next table turned a page. Light came through the window and fell across the open notebook and the cast-iron skillet visible at the top of the unzipped backpack. "What do I do now?" Micah said. "That's not my question to answer, baby." He had called him baby. The word hung in the air between them like something borrowed from a voice that was no longer in the room. The negotiations, such as they were, took 6 days. Roscoe handled them because Roscoe had been inside that building for 38 years and understood its load-bearing walls better than anyone. Micah did not go back to the restaurant until the 4th day, and when he did, he went to the bar, not the kitchen. He sat on a stool and Roscoe brought him a bowl of soup without being asked. Talia was there. A man named Jerome Alcott was there. He was a food writer for a small magazine that covered the Boston restaurant scene. And he had heard about Micah not from Kemp's publicist, but from a dishwasher at a restaurant on Newberry Street, who had heard it from a prep cook at Harlan's, who had told the story at a bar after work, the way cooks tell stories at bars after work, which is to say without embellishment and with great respect. Micah's terms were written on 2 pages, torn from the composition notebook. His handwriting was neater than usual because Roscoe had told him to take his time. He would not be photographed for any article about Harlan's. His grandmother's recipes were his. Any dish developed from them would carry her name. He would accept a full-time position on the line at standard pay. He would not accept charity, a publicist, or a story. He would find his own apartment with his own wages. The beurre blanc on the menu, if Kemp wanted to keep it, would be listed as Etta's beurre blanc, or it would not be listed at all. There was one more term. It was the one Micah had added on the 6th day, after Roscoe had told him the story of the smothered pork chops and the chef named Gerard. Harlan's would establish a paid apprenticeship for 1 young cook per year from a neighborhood without a culinary school. The apprenticeship would be named after Micah Lennox. It would be funded by the restaurant. It would be administered by Talia Reeves, not by Kemp, not by the publicist, not by anyone whose job it was to make the restaurant look good. The terms were brought to Kemp on the 6th day. Kemp read them in his office with the door closed. He read them twice. He came downstairs and stood at the pass and looked at the sauté station where a temporary cook was working competently but without the thing that Micah had brought to it, the thing that did not have a name but that everyone in the kitchen could feel when it was missing. He agreed to every term. The Globe writer came the following Tuesday. She ate the tasting menu. She ate the halibut with Etta's beurre blanc. She asked to speak to the chef who had made the sauce. Kemp, to his credit, or to whatever grew in the space where his credit used to be, sent Micah out. Micah stood in the dining room in his clean whites with his hands at his sides. The writer asked him where he had trained. He told her about Blue Hill Avenue. He told her about the kitchen with the linoleum floor and the cast-iron skillet, and the woman who had taught him that food was not a performance but a conversation between the cook and the person who was hungry. The article ran the following Sunday. It was not about Kemp. It was not about Harlan's. It was about a 10-inch cast-iron skillet, and the woman who had seasoned it for 40 years, and the grandson who had carried it through every cold night in the city, until he found a kitchen that deserved it. The photograph that ran with the article was not taken by a publicist. It was taken by Jerome Alcott on his phone, and it showed Micah's hands on the handle of the skillet, the black iron surface catching the light from the kitchen, his grandmother's notebook open on the counter beside it. You could not see Micah's face. You could only see his hands and the pan and the steam rising from something being made with care. The apprenticeship launched in January. The first apprentice was a 17-year-old girl from Matapan who had been cooking for her younger brothers since she was 12 because there was no one else to do it. Her name was Keiko, and on her first day in the kitchen at Harlan's, Micah taught her how to make beurre blanc the way his grandmother had taught him, standing behind her with his voice low and steady, telling her not to think about it, telling her to let her hand know. Kemp watched from the pass. He did not say anything. He had learned, in the weeks since Micah had come back, that there were things happening in his kitchen that he had not built and could not take credit for, and that were better than anything he could have built on his own. On a Tuesday night in March, 6 months after the night, Micah Lennox had walked into the restaurant soaking wet and asking to wash dishes for a plate of food. He stood at his station after the last ticket had gone out. The kitchen was breaking down around him. Cooks were wrapping, wiping, sweeping. The rhythm of it was a rhythm he knew now the way he knew the rhythm of his own breathing. He reached under the station and pulled out the cast-iron skillet. He held it for a moment. The weight of it in his hand was the weight of everything he had carried and everything he had chosen not to put down. He set it on the stove. He turned on the flame. He laid a thin film of oil across the surface the way his grandmother had taught him, every night, without exception, because a skillet that was cared for would care for you back. The oil shimmered. The iron warmed. The kitchen smelled for a moment like Blue Hill Avenue on a Wednesday evening in a life that was gone but that had left its seasoning in everything it touched. Micah turned off the flame. He wiped the skillet clean. He wrapped it in the dish towel and slid it into his backpack. He walked out through the front door. Nina said good night. He said good night back. The October night had become a March night, and the air on Micah Lennox's face when he stepped outside was cold but not cruel. It was the kind of cold that reminded you that you were outside, and that outside was a place you had survived, and that surviving it had made you someone who could walk through any door in the city without asking permission. On the wall of the kitchen, above the sauté station, in a plain black frame that Roscoe had hung one morning before anyone else arrived, was a photograph from 1986. A young black woman in a white chef's coat, standing at a stove, holding a cast-iron skillet, looking directly at the camera with an expression that was not smiling and was not serious but was something in between, the expression of a woman who knew exactly what she was doing and did not need anyone to tell her so. Beneath the photograph, in small brass letters on a plate Roscoe had paid for himself, Etta Lennox, 1948 to 2024. Season everything with your own name. If you stayed with Micah all the way to the end of this story, thank you for that. Stories like his, the quiet, stubborn ones, the kind that walk into rooms without asking permission, are the ones we love telling on this channel. If something in it moved you even a little, hit subscribe so the next one finds you when it is ready. And before you go, we would really like to hear from you. Have you ever walked into a room where you knew you were not welcome and stayed anyway? Have you ever had to prove you belonged to people who had already decided you did not? Tell us in the comments below. Some of the best stories we have ever shared on this channel started as a single comment from someone who almost did not write it. Maybe yours is the next one. Take care of yourselves. We will see you in the next story.